welcome back to the Grease Den. I have a couple of loaner amps in the house today. Over here we have a DSL100 HR. It had reverb. I took the reverb tank out of it. I'll put it back in if my buddy wants it put back in. I'm pretty sure he doesn't. But I took out the reverb tank. I kind of just cleaned out the entire chassis. I took the head out of the head shell and just kind of gave it a preliminary inspection. There weren't any like issues, nothing like burned or overheated or anything inside. There's a little bit of a liquid spill next to the, I believe the output transformer, maybe the power transformer. It's a little bit of rust on the actual chassis, but other than that, it was functionally, it seems fine. I played through it for a little while here, and it seems like it sounds pretty good, you know. The other amp is a Peavey 6505. This is just the single EQ version of the head. They say it's identical to a 5150. I've played some 5150s that sound different than this though, so I don't know how true that is, but it does sound pretty good. Has a ton of gain. So today we're going to be shooting out these two amps with each other, and I'm also going to shoot them out with like the higher end boutique like versions. So that would be the Marshall JMP and the Soldano SLO. So the JMP being the godfather of the DSL, and then the SLO being the granddaddy of the 6505. So we'll see how that sounds. So yeah, I'm gonna start out with the DSL. Here, I'll run you down with some of the specifics here of my setup. So as usual, I have the power station on. Those are the settings. The DSL is on the VTM channel right now, and then I've got my board here. Probably just leave it on the Ghoul Junior for this. We're just going to be shooting out the gain channels. There's the SLO and the JMP, and there's the 6505 with its settings. I'm not going to mess with the settings a lot, you guys, in this one, just because I just want to make this quick and sweet. Here is the settings on the DSL. I'm playing a 2005 BC Rich Bich neck through. It has a Avedissian Scythe in the bridge position. I'm going to start out with the DSL. We're playing into a 90s Soldano V30 loaded cab. The mic is on the speaker where the dust cone meets the cab. So here we go. That sounds pretty good. It's a little bit thin. It's a little bit like lacking in the low end, and I did change his settings just a little bit. I just turned up the bass, and otherwise I might have turned up the gain a little bit and adjusted the master volume. But you know, the treble and mid are pretty well cranked right now, and I think that sounds pretty good. and the presence is up as well. I think it sounds pretty good. It just doesn't have as much of a 3D, like, super articulate, fat element. Like, I could say that of all of these other amps that I have, pretty much. So let's switch over to the 6505 now. A little bit more noise. It might be a little bit louder, so I might need to adjust the... Cool. I'm just going to record a quick loop and we'll go back and forth between the two amps. yeah, it sounds like the Peavey has a little more mid-range. When I was playing through it, I felt like the DSL was a little bit more, had a little bit more pleasing of a gain character than the Peavey. The Peavey's a little bit harsher and more like clinical, whereas the Marshall has a little bit more of that classic sound to it. So I don't know, if I could marry the preamp of the Marshall with power amp of the Peavey, I'd probably be happy. But that's an experiment for another time. So yeah, we'll shoot them out with the other amps now. Here I've got the SLO and the Marshall. Here are the settings. So we'll start out with the SLO. Here's the SLO on the overdrive channel. We'll switch over to the Peavey. Now we're going to go over to the Marshall. Here's the JMP. To the DSL. It's the DSL. Alright, we'll do this one more time. I'm going to go back to the Peavey, and we'll go back and forth between the SLO and the Peavey. Switch over to the JMP. We'll go back and forth the JMP and the DSL a few times. We gotta do this time here. Obviously, I think the JMP and the SLO just benefit from having way higher quality parts, and maybe the build quality is just higher. You know, they just have a lot more articulation in the sound, but they're all built off of the same architecture. These are all based off of JCM 800, 2203, Super Lead, Fender Bassman circuits, you know, and all of that is like, the EQs work very similar. The overall feature sets of these 4 amps are not that far apart. You do have a lower gain channels on every amp except for the JMP. There are like crunch channels and crunch tones, but you know, I don't really care to shoot out the crunch tones with these heads. I know that the crunch tones in my Friedman modified Soldano and the JMP are going to be vastly superior to a stock DSL and a stock 6505. You know, that kind of goes without saying, but they are capable of pulling off a variety of tones. If you're doing high gain stuff, boosting it, there's not going to be a huge difference, you know. I mean, there's not like, the price difference is crazy. You can get this head for $500. A JMP like this will cost you $2,500. You know, the 6505 is a grand now. Maybe you can get one for less, you know, and the SLO is $4 grand new, you know, $3 grand. So there's a crazy price difference. There's really no reason for it other than the name and the build quality, which honestly, these amps are built like tanks. These 6505s are built like tanks. This one's built pretty good too. When I opened it up, everything looks clean. It looks, you know, honestly, it reminded me of when I've opened up the diesel. There's a lot of, you know, a lot of like flying leads and like short leads. Like, it's laid out in a very like intuitive fashion. It would be very easy to work on that amp, you know. It would be easier to work on that amp than the new SLO. So yeah, I like both of these heads. I'd like to add a 5150 to the collection eventually. I'd prefer to get a 5152. One of the earlier ones with the 2 independent EQs, because they have a little bit less gain, which I think would be better for me. And if I do that, I'll do a more in-depth review with more, you know, messing with the knobs and such. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. This has been the Grease Den.